Welcome to Just Break Up, the podcast about love, heartbreak, and all the relationship advice you don't want to hear. My name is Sierra Mulder.
And I'm Sam Blackwell. And today we're going to answer a letter from somebody whose curiosity about her partner isn't being reciprocated. But before we begin, we just want to give you our Surgeon General's warning, which is that Sierra and I are not licensed mental health practitioners.
No, we are not. We are not professionals. We are not trained in any of this. Some of us are incredibly sleep deprived in this very moment, so not going to name names.
Oh, no.
So please take our advice as you see fit. We're only here to offer our humble musings to hopefully shed some understanding and maybe some laughs about the incredibly rewarding but mostly confusing experience that is love.
Cool. Let's get into the check-in topic because it is Monday and we do this on the first episode of every week. This check-in topic was inspired by a New York Times article that I stumbled upon called Can a Sexless Marriage Be a Happy One by Amanda Montai. I was really intrigued by this article because, I think we've been having lots of conversations about the ways in which like sex shows up in people's lives and also the ways that like disparate sexual desire kind of shows up in like predictable patterns around how people feel about it. And also just like this stigma that we have that like a sexless relationship is somehow like sad or like awful. Even though we also know that that relationships have lots of different aspects to them that aren't sex. And sometimes we're like, sex is the most important thing, but it's like, why is it the only important thing and not like all of these other important things?
Yes, totally.
And the article talks through some different scenarios of like actual couples who are in relationships that are sexless. And in some of those scenarios, it's because one person is like not really open to having sex more often than like once a year or once every month or something, and the other person wants it. And sometimes it's just an agreement that they came to that like, this isn't fulfilling for either of us. And where we just want to like be close and co-parent and live together and support each other in a way that doesn't involve sex.
Yes.
And lots of really interesting interviews with actual mental health providers.
And actual couples, like Sam said.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Just like talking about the ways in which our understandings of sex have changed and kind of digging in a little bit to why, particularly like in the 80s and 90s, sex became the thing that was central to all marriages, right? Like that if you're not having good sex consistently, then somehow your marriage is like dysfunctional or your relationship is somehow doomed because of that.
I thought we could just share a couple things that we enjoyed from it and like point our listeners to the article. I appreciated kind of like what you said, the variety of reasons in the couples in the article, the variety and scope of reasons behind how much sex they have or don't have. I'm always like humbled and comforted when I'm reminded of the extreme diversity of the human experience, So even just reading like several different reasons, or more like several different dynamics within different couples and the reasons behind them. One of them, it was like, postpartum complications. The other one was like really wanting to be rooted in her, identity of consent. You know what I mean? So I really appreciated that. And then I also enjoyed just like one idea I pulled from it. One of the first couples that they interviewed, the wife was saying how her favorite thing about her marriage was that it was really safe and comfortable and comforting and secure. Like it was, they had built like this nest of security and good feelings. And she said, I love that. That's like my favorite part of my marriage. And also it makes my sex drive go down. And I don't know, something about that idea was like having that be a reasonable answer. Like I know when you and I talk about sex drives and different dynamics and different relationships, particularly informed by what we learned in Angela Chen's book, Ace, that there's, hundreds of different reasons why we have the sex or don't have the sex that we have, and all of them are okay, But just hearing again that like somebody, it makes so much sense to me that the lower excitement and higher comfort, security, like rest, peacefulness that comes in secure relationships, like I hadn't really thought about that being tied to a decline in a sex drive, but it makes so much sense. It's something I relate to. You know what I mean? I don't feel so, I don't feel like I need to express myself in that physical way as much. So I appreciated that articulation.
I think it's also really interesting in thinking about like the ways that we use sex for like validation of our like attractiveness to other people. Mm-hmm. And when we have validation in other ways, that like need for sex as like validation kind of goes away.
Yes,
right? Like
totally.
I think I feel that like really intensely, right? Like I've had a lot of sex that I didn't really want to have because I wanted validation from people.
Right.
Or I wanted their attention, or I wanted to like prove that I could, like all of these different things. And now that I'm in like a relationship that is like secure and good, like I still want to have sex, but it's like I want to have it for different reasons, which has required a different type of learning about myself and like how sex should function in our relationship. Yes. And I think that kind of struck me. And I also think that like, and to be clear, like a lot of this article is like pretty heteronormative in how we're thinking about sex and marriage. And so it is about like getting married, a man and a woman, a biological man and a woman getting married, or a cis man and a woman getting married, and then like having children as being kind of like the norm. And what I'll say is that like the ways in which revolutions like the birth control pill, like women being out in the workforce more, and like sort of the ways in which this has disrupted our understanding of what marriages are for, which is like having like a collective group to like raise children, has like changed a lot. And so what's interesting is that like then people started really seeing sex as like, oh, it's for pleasure, it's for connection. And it's like, that's actually not what sex has existed for in relationships for like a really long time. So why are we assuming that that's the only thing that it's for now? Right. And so I think that it's good that a lot of mental health folks and folks in this area are also like looking at it and thinking, wait a minute, this like new like sex is the primary way to create intimacy in relationships is actually like a really new concept to us. So why are we holding it like in such high esteem?
Yeah.
And why can't we actually look at the multitude of ways in which like other forms of intimacy are maybe underdeveloped in the ways that we're approaching relationships and spend time there as well, right? Like, and if like, this is again, like, I'm not trying to say that anyone should be having sex or not having sex, right? Like you get to choose all of those different things. And if you're having sex every day, great. I love that for you. If you're having sex like never, I also love that for you if that's what feels good. But I do think that there's like, I'm curious about the ways in which like sex as the marker of the success of a relationship became into being, right? Like where did that come from, and who decided, right? Because it's like, it's very interesting to me. I would, if there's a book out there, I would love to read it.
Angela Chen. No, I'm just kidding. So we thought this was a thought-provoking article that's in alignment with a lot of the conversations we've been having here on the podcast and, personally between each other, about our culture's centering of sex as the purest form of intimacy when, as Sam said, it is just not. So I hope this makes people feel a little bit normal or seen. Check out the article on the New York Times, right? And let's get into today's letter.
Let's do it. All right. Today's letter comes from Little Miss Curiosity, whose pronouns are she, her, who is writing from across the pond. Dear Sam and Sierra, I want to start by saying there was a point in my life, a very low point, when your Monday episodes and Spotify's Friday playlists were quite literally all I had to look forward to. We're not in that low place anymore, thank God, but you two are the queer guardian angels I never knew I needed, so thank you. Okay, so here's the deal. I, she, her, 25, moved across the pond to a brand new country 6 months ago. I've been seeing my boyfriend, he, him, 28, for 2 of those months. Let's call him H. H is funny, kind, giving, attentive in bed, and together we've probably had some of the best sex I've had to date. About a week ago, I told him that I wanted him to be my boyfriend, and now we are official. He is cute and well-dressed, smells nice, and is also obsessed with me in a non-cringy, honestly just so pure sort of way. The catch? For the last few weeks, I've been noticing that much of our conversations are led by yours truly, me. I ask him about his family, his job, his friends, his past. H is trans, and that's something we've talked about at length too. What he's comfortable with in bed, what he isn't, how being trans has affected the way he operates in relationship, etc. H grew up in a different country/culture, the one we live in now, and we talk about this also. H is open to self-reflection and happy to answer the slew of questions I throw at him. And yet, I can't help but feel that as if this question asking is one-sided. For me, being curious about each other's psychology as an integral part of a relationship. To be seen, I need to feel like my partner is curious about how my brain works, and a large part of this is them asking questions about my past, my relationships, my family, etc. H doesn't do this. When I share with him how I'm feeling or express concern over something that's happened in my life, I quite literally get 0 follow-up questions. He will hug me and tell me he's sorry, buy me flowers, bring me water, but no prompting questions, like at all. So, about a week ago, I finally brought this up. I told him that to date, our relationship seems to be built off of attraction and chemistry, but for me moving forward, I need us to have more than just that. I need us to be curious about one another and how each other's brains work, how we process emotions, who we are as people. He asked, do you want me to ask you more questions? And literally, I said yes. We also talked about how growing up in 2 different cultures might have played a role in our communication styles. Talking about emotions, interpersonal relations is not something that he was ever taught to do. In fact, my directness surrounding these topics is new and slightly shocking to him. We had another follow-up conversation a few days later where I reiterated the importance of curiosity for me in relationship. It felt good leaving both conversations, hopeful that things might shift, but they haven't. Since that first convo, and mind you, it's been only a week, I feel that I am still the one who asked the prompting questions. I've even tried playing some couples cards games with him. I am curious about who he is because this is the man I'm diving into a relationship with, you know? But I can't help but feel that curiosity is not reciprocated. This man likes me a lot and tells me so all the time, so I just don't understand how he doesn't feel the need to know more about me, you know? My question then is, what do I do moving forward? If I bring this up again with him, I'm afraid I'll sound redundant, self-centered even. Maybe I am. Maybe he is trying and I'm just too oblivious to notice. I can't just tell him to ask me questions because what I really crave is for him to want to ask me questions, you know? This feels like a bit of a hole. I'm going to stop now. Anyway, thank you for providing the space for me to write this all down. You are truly queens, Spencer too. All the best, Little Miss Curiosity.
All right, my darling. Thank you so much for writing and trusting us with this letter. This is a difficult spot to be in, especially in what I'll describe as a fresh relationship, you know? Because it's one of those things where you're like, is it me? Am I reading too much into this? Am I not getting enough? Is this an actual incompatibility or am I being sensitive? You know, or at least that's what my sensitive brain thinks, you know, is
Sure.
this me or you? And I definitely relate to this. I'll share a personal story later when we get into the advice about a similar dynamic that was really truly frustrating. But first, I just want to say it's understandable and reasonable of you to want to feel like your partner is curious about you, invested in you, wanting to learn, you know, dive into you. And in the same breath, we all show our interest in different ways, and we all have different communication styles. We all have different flirting styles and different, you know, bedside table manners, you know. So Sam and I are going to hopefully try to strike the balance between all of those things to give you some tangible take-home advice. But first, we're going to take a very quick break.
All right, friends, welcome back. Little Miss Curiosity. I am sorry that you're in this place where it feels like your curiosity about your partner isn't being reciprocated. You know, I think it can be hard for folks to feel like they're the ones who are like putting in all of the effort. And it can also be really hard to be like, well, I told you what I needed and you're not like doing it immediately. Like that is also really hard because it's hard to tell people what you need and what you want from them. And absolutely. And I also really appreciate this, the thing that you said that's like, I actually don't want him to ask me more questions. I want him to want to ask me more questions, which is also deeply relatable in terms of like, because it's not actually about the questions itself. It's about the curiosity that you feel like is missing because of the fact that he's not asking you questions about your past and how you're feeling and all of your relationships. And I think actually, Sierra, you have a story to tell about like,
well, not a specific
some of your realization about.
Well, I wanted to answer this letter particularly because I relate so deeply to this. It wasn't even a relationship. One of my past infatuations, you know, somebody I was entangled with for years, had a very like, will they, won't they vibe for years.
Turns out it was always won't they. Whole time, just won't.
Just didn't. And maybe that's my advice, you know, because let me say this. I relate to this so strongly because this particular person, I was absolutely obsessed with him. And all I wanted was for him to be interested in me. You know, like this particular person had a very, you know, I don't know if he was being aloof. I don't think so. I think this is just his conversation style, is that it didn't flow very naturally back and forth. It was kind of, I remember this being like a thing that frustrated me for years, that I would like ask him a question or an open-ended conversation, or I would bring up something in my life, or I would, we would be doing a 20 questions type of thing, and it would stop at question number 1 about him. You know, it would literally like the silence would like hang in the air. And I thought it was so bizarre. And I kept trying to, you know, I tried to get more out of him. And then all of a sudden, like years later, I was like, oh, was he just like an asshole that whole time? Like, was he just a bad conversationalist who is generally like self-centered?
Sure.
Maybe. But you know, I will also add that I appreciated the line that you pulled out, Sam, about like wanting him to want to ask more questions, because I think I didn't, for a long time, I was like, oh, he just doesn't like me enough. He wasn't interested in me enough. But I think he was just an a-hole and I wasn't really, not an a-hole, but like, I think he wasn't, he wasn't making me feel good about myself. And I wish that I like prioritized that feeling more and like acted on it more. But I will say, I think one of the things that stopped me from doing that sooner, stopped me from realizing like this person just wasn't for me, was my general obsession with him. And the fact that I was a lot younger and my desire to be, lovingly interrogated, my desire for him to want to know me deeply. Back then, I wondered if it was a selfish desire. Like, I wonder if it, I was, especially when I was younger, relationships felt like they were always about me, in a selfish way. My world revolved around me, back then. And I think it makes a lot of sense that the letter writer is struggling with whether or not this is valid or not, because we're also told, like, don't be self-centered, don't be selfish, ask about them, be polite, be demure, whatever. And I don't know what the right answer is in this situation, but I wish I could go back to, like, I don't know, 23-year-old Sierra and be like, this person doesn't make you feel good about yourself. Right. And it's okay to want like a teaspoon of respect and interest from them. you don't have to like play the cool card. That's what I would say.
For sure.
You don't have
for
any
sure.
cool cards, Sierra, so just stop pretending like you do.
You have so many cool cards.
No.
You're a very cool person. Or at least you were when you were 23.
Not anymore. Anyway, yeah. So that's my only piece of lived experience that I can compare to this. So to the letter writer, I think Sam and I want to know, like, are you willing to see all of the ways in which this person might be showing their interest in you in different ways? Because he's a different human being. He looks through the world in a different way. And so you are grading his interest in you based off of your scale, your preferences. But he, you might be like a 14 out of 10 on his scale of interesting, but that's his approach to you. And in the same exact moment, he just might not make you feel really good about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or maybe he's like self-centered. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that there's an opportunity to kind of look at all of these different things that are happening here. And right, like, so this example that you gave of like, if I'm having a hard day, like he doesn't ask me questions, but he brings me water, he buys me flowers, he tells me he's sorry, he gives me a hug, right? Like, those are all, I think, ways that he is trying to express care and appreciation and interest in you, even though it doesn't look like curiosity and questions, right? It looks like care that's coming in a different way. And even in your letter, you say that like he's literally obsessed with you. And I'm curious about like what that obsession looks and feels like if it isn't curiosity, right? Like, how do you know that he's obsessed with you, even if he's not asking you questions in this particular way? And again, like I just say this because Sierra said it, right? He's a different person in a different body who has been taught different things about how you're supposed to show up for people. And this is stuff that I think that all of us in relationship have to continue to learn about ourselves and about our partners, right? I frequently catch myself doing things that I know are not showing Peter that I love him. And I have to stop myself and be like, wait a minute, rewire. Peter appreciates it when I do this. This happened literally yesterday where I was like watching a show and he came home and he like sat in a chair and I was like, oh, this is the indication. I've learned this. This is the indication that I should pause my show and I should like focus on him, even though what I want to do is continue my show. And then when I'm done with that, I will talk to him, right? Like just this like mismatch of like our understanding of what we've been taught about how we should prioritize things, right? Like he's told me it's important for him that when he comes home, I say hello and I pay attention to him and I ask what his day is. Like, but that's something I had to learn because it was not innate in me. Yeah. It's not how my family functioned. We didn't pause things to like say hello to each other when we walked in the door, right? Like that didn't happen. So I think that again, like part of being in relationship is about building and growing towards places where we're both stretching, right? And I know that it's been a week and he hasn't done any of the things that you have asked him. I also want to encourage you to continue to ask him for these things because it's not a one and done conversation. It's going to need to be a continual reminder. So like when something happens and you're like, he's not asking me a question, say, this is when I would expect you, or this is when I would love for you to ask me more about this thing, right? Yeah. Help him, right? Yeah. In the same way that hopefully he is helping you figure out how he needs to be seen and held as well.
Yeah. And if it takes the pressure off it, which I think might be a good strategy in this, keep trying those question games or be more explicit and say, I like learning more about you and I enjoy telling you more about my life. So let's do these 37 questions to fall in love from the New York Times or whatever it is. You can, I think Sam's totally right. You can be explicit and say like, would you like to hear more about this? Or can you ask me more about this? Or hey, I'm still not feeling the follow through from our conversation before. And also you can be indirectly explicit and say like, hey, I really love learning more about your childhood and I want to share mine with you. Can we talk about the different things in our childhood? You might, how about this? I just want to say explicitly, this bugged the crap out of me in that situationship that I described. It made me feel undervalued and small and like confused because I wasn't sure if I was being a selfish asshole wanting this person to want to know about me. You're not, number one.
Yeah.
And, trusting that this person's a good person who is good to you and is showing you that in all these different ways. They might not be good at coming up with questions on the spot. They might not think about conversations as the excavating, as the digging. They might just think about the conversations as like a pretty walk, and you just comment upon the things that you see,
Sure.
So you might have to hold their hand in a little bit more of a tangible way.
For sure. And also, if these types of questions, if being with somebody who is good at asking these types of questions, who wants to do the excavation and not the pleasant walk, is something that's really important to you, right? Like if this is something that you need in order to be seen, right? And it's hard to look for other ways, then this isn't the person for you, I don't think, right? Like, and that's also okay. It's okay if this is the thing that is the deal breaker. It's okay if you look at this and think like, if you learn from the situation that like, yes, this person is perfect on paper and I really want to be with him. And also this thing is so big that I can't be in relationship with him, and then use that as you are investigating what future relationships look like, right? Learn from this to say, okay, this is something that I need to be on the lookout for because this is something that is clearly really important to me. But I don't think you're a bad person or a selfish person for wanting to engage in this type of deep conversation and to have that be reciprocated. Like I totally think that is reasonable. And if you feel like your partner isn't capable of giving you that, then I think it's totally understandable that you would break up with him. And I want to hold the idea that we can practice and show curiosity, kindness, respect, compassion in lots of different ways. And in this relationship or in future relationships, it might behoove you to begin to learn to look for those different ways as well. Because no matter what, even if you decide to break up with this person and find someone new, there are elements of that relationship that aren't going to fit perfectly, right? That is the reality of being in relationship with people. So how can you build up that muscle to be looking for the different ways in which people show their love and kindness and affection for us that you might be missing because you're only looking for it in one particular way?
That's right. All right, my darling, we hope this helps.
Thank you so much for writing. We love you. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you would like more content from us, or if you would like access to our monthly office hours, you can support us on Patreon. If you support us on Patreon for as little as $5 an hour was what I was going to say. If you support us on Patreon for as little as $5 a month.
That's like nothing. What am I talking about? I was like, oh, God.
If you would like to support us for as little as $5 a month, you'll get an additional bonus weekly episode, as well as access to those monthly office hours where Sierra and I hop on Zoom with all of you and just shoot the shit and answer really fun questions. That's patreon.com/justbreakuppod.
You can slide into our DMs, send us your favorite relationship meme, but most importantly, you can submit your questions about all matters of the heart at justbreakuppod.com, which is also where you can find our merchandise.
Please remember to like, follow, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating and review. This literally keeps our mics on and helps us reach more brokenhearted souls who need 2 random strangers giving them relationship advice.
Just Break Up is a production of Duvid Media, original music, recording, editing, producing, all magical things by our good friend Spencer Worth Davis. Make sure to check out his podcasts and his music. And remember, it's okay to want to feel desired, to want to feel interesting and the subject of curiosity of your loved ones. And also, we all move through this world differently, whether we are digging that excavation site of a conversation or just on a lovely stroll. We can meet each other in the middle. We can lend each other our tools. And if all else fails,
just break up.